I'd been coming to the same corner cafe for a year without thinking much about it. They kept the lights soft, and the air smelled faintly of burnt sugar from the pastries. It was the sort of place you go to when you don't want to explain yourself. I usually sat in the back, nursing a black coffee, scrolling through messages I never sent. That morning felt no different, until she walked in. She was carrying a bag of groceries, like she'd just stopped on her way somewhere else. Mid-40s, hair pinned up but loose at the edges, a soft navy sweater. She scanned the room. Then her eyes caught mine before flicking away. I knew her, of course. Everyone did. She was Mark's girl. Mark, my oldest friend. She'd always been polite, a little distant, the sort of adult who asked how you were and didn't wait for the answer. She went to the counter. I went back to staring at my phone. No new messages. The cursor blinked in the empty chat box like it was judging me. When she stepped up to my table, I looked up too fast. "Hey," she said. "You always drink at this dark?" I smiled, unsure what to do with my hands. "Guess I'm a creature of habit." She laughed, soft, almost to herself. "Mark would hate that. He takes half the sugar jar." I hadn't expected her to sit, but she did, easing the grocery bag down beside her. She remembered my order. She always had. Black, no sugar. She set her own drink on the table, tea with lemon, and folded the napkin in slow, neat quarters while we talked about nothing. "You still working nights?" she asked. "Mostly." "That's rough." Her voice stayed low, like we were sharing something private without meaning to. The cafe's hum filled the spaces between our words. The grinder, the soft clink of cups, a baby fussing near the window. I caught myself watching her hands, the way she wrapped them around the mug, the small silver ring she twisted with her thumb. I told a story about a customer at the shop where I worked, something trivial. She smiled, tilted her head, and for a second her eyes held mine. Not polite this time. Curious. "You're quieter than you used to be," she said. I shrugged. Guess I got tired of talking. She didn't answer, just looked down at her tea. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I realized how long it had been since someone sat across from me and just listened. My phone buzzed on the table. An unsent draft blinked back at me. Half a message to an old friend, no recipient. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. "You should text whoever that is," she said softly. I nodded but didn't move. She stood, adjusting her sweater, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Anyway," she said, almost an afterthought, "I'm here most mornings now, if you ever want company." She left before I could answer, the bell over the door jingling. Her tea sat unfinished. I stared at the empty chair, then at my phone. A new message appeared from an unknown number. "You seem different today." I didn't know she even had my number. I didn't see her again for a week, but she stayed in my head in a way she never had before. That half smile, the napkin folding, the way she said I was quieter now. I'd catch myself replaying it while wiping down counters at work or waiting for the bus at night, thumb hovering over unsent messages. On Thursday, she showed up at the cafe again. This time she was already at a table when I came in. No groceries, just a book open in front of her, glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up, smiled, small but definite. I hesitated, then walked over. "Mind if I sit?" she said, sliding her bag off the chair. We ordered drinks. She remembered mine again. I noticed the little things. She had painted her nails a muted gray, and there was a crease on her wrist where her watch must have been. For a while we just sat there, steam rising between us. The cafe's radio murmured some old song I didn't recognize. She closed her book. "How's work?" she asked. "Same. Long nights." She nodded. Mark used to do nights too. Hated it. The mention of his name felt like a door opening and closing at the same time. I stared at my cup. "You guys still?" She shook her head before I could finish. "No. Been a year now. People just assume." Her voice was light, but her eyes weren't. She rubbed a thumb along the edge of her mug. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "It's fine," she said, but it didn't sound like it. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You know, when Mark and I first moved here, you used to come over all the time. You were what, 20? 19? Something like that. You'd sit on the floor, playing with the dog. Always laughing." She smiled faintly. I remember thinking you'd never grow up. I laughed under my breath. Guess I had to. She tilted her head. Guess we both did. There was a pause. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. She was looking at me differently again, like she was searching for the kid she used to know, or maybe for someone else entirely. I worry sometimes, she said suddenly, about becoming invisible. The words hung there. I didn't know what to say, so I just reached for the sugar jar and passed it to her, even though she never took sugar. She smiled at the gesture anyway. I still remember, I said, surprising myself, how you made tea that night after Mark's accident. You were shaking, but you made sure everyone else had a cup first. She looked down. You remember that? Yeah. It's weird what sticks. She let out a soft laugh. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. We sat in silence after that. The cafe filled with new customers, the air shifting around us. She reached for her bag, pulled out a thermos. I started bringing my own tea, she said, unscrewing the lid. She poured some into my cup without asking. It was milder than what I usually drank, but I didn't mind. We sat shoulder to shoulder, not touching but close enough that I could smell her perfume, something faint, like clean linen. She reached across me for a napkin, and her fingers brushed mine. It was nothing, really, a quick accidental touch, but it sent a small jolt through me. She drew her hand back, eyes on her tea. Sorry, she murmured. I shook my head. Don't be. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said, You should come by the house sometime. I've been clearing out old boxes. Could use a hand. It was casual, like she was asking me to hold the door. But the way she didn't look at me when she said it made it feel like more. I stared at the dregs of tea in my cup, wondering if I'd already stepped past some line I couldn't see. Her house smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet when I stepped in. Late afternoon light slanted through the blinds, catching the dust she'd stirred up from boxes stacked in the hallway. She handed me a pair of old work gloves and smiled like she wasn't sure she should. Just this room, she said. Mostly paper. We worked without much talk. Old photos, kitchen gadgets still in packaging, a pile of Mark's shirts she folded and refolded before finally setting aside. Every so often she'd brush past me in the narrow space, her arm grazing mine. Neither of us said anything. On the mantel a framed photo leaned sideways. Me, Mark, and her at some barbecue years ago. She saw me looking at it and turned it face down. Too many ghosts, she murmured. We broke for tea at the small kitchen table. She poured, then wrapped her hands around her cup, but didn't drink. You okay? I asked. She nodded once. Just tired. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, thumb hovering, then flipped it over. The gesture was small but sharp, like a door closing. I wanted to ask, about Mark, about us, but the words wouldn't settle in my mouth. Instead, I watched her trace circles on the rim of her cup. You ever think about leaving? She said suddenly. Sometimes. Where? I shrugged. Anywhere. She smiled faintly. You always were a runner. We sat in that thin silence. Outside, a car door slammed. Through the window, I saw a neighbor in the driveway, one of Mark's old friends. He looked up, saw me at the table with her, frowned a little. I shifted in my seat. You should probably, I started. She shook her head. He doesn't matter. But something in her shoulders changed, straighter, guarded. She stood, took our cups to the sink. I stayed at the table, feeling like a trespasser in a room I'd been invited into. When she came back, she leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Her eyes were on me, but softer than before. You're not a kid anymore, she said quietly. I stood too, not sure what to do with my hands. No, we were only a step apart now. I could smell her perfume again, feel the warmth of her body in the cool kitchen air. She looked up at me, lips parted like she might speak, but didn't. I reached to take the mug from her hands, fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, it felt like gravity shifting, like we were leaning toward the same point without meaning to. Then she stepped back, just enough. I should finish these boxes, she said, voice thin. I nodded, throat dry. The space between us felt larger than the whole room that it had rained all afternoon, the kind that leaves the air damp and cool, but not cold. We left the boxes half-sorted and walked to the park near her house. She said she needed fresh air. I didn't say I'd been waiting for her to ask. The park was nearly empty. A few kids played by the swings, their shouts carried thinly on the wet wind. We found a bench under a maple tree. Drops still clung to the leaves, falling now and then onto the back of my neck. She sat first, smoothing her skirt over her knees, then motioned for me to join her. We didn't talk at first. Our breaths rose in small clouds. She traced a pattern on the damp bench with her fingertip. I kept my hands in my pockets. I heard Mark's moving back, she said finally. I looked at her. He didn't tell me. Doesn't tell me either, she murmured. That's just Mark. She gave a small, brittle laugh. Then it broke. I thought I was done feeling like this, she said, eyes on the playground. Like I'm waiting for someone else to choose what happens to me. I didn't know if she was talking to me or herself. She went on before I could answer. You showing up here? Helping. She stopped, bit her lip. It's nice. Dangerous, maybe. I don't know. Her voice cracked a little on the last word. She wiped at her face quickly, though there were no tears. I wanted to say something steady, something adult. Instead I said, I think about you. More than I should. The words came out softer than I intended. She turned then, slowly. Her eyes met mine. You shouldn't, she whispered. I know. We sat there with that between us. She reached into her bag and took out the thermos. Hands trembling slightly, she poured tea into the lid and passed it to me. I held it, but didn't drink. Our fingers touched longer than necessary in the handoff. You're young, she said. You have no idea what this would cost. You're not invisible, I said. Her breath hitched. She looked down, pressed her palm flat on the bench like she needed the wood to steady her. I'm scared, she said. Scared of you seeing me. Really seeing me. I set the lid back on the thermos, my hands brushing hers again. For a moment we leaned toward each other, the air between us heavy and damp, the kids' voices fading. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes. Neither of us moved. Don't, she whispered, not angry, almost pleading. I stopped. We stayed like that, inches apart, until a car horn sounded from the street, and she blinked, straightening. The moment folded back into itself. She stood. We should go. I followed, heart thudding. She didn't look at me as we walked back, and I didn't ask the question forming in my throat. After that day at the park she disappeared, not completely, but enough to feel it. Messages unanswered. Doors locked when I stopped by to help with boxes. At the cafe, her usual table stayed empty. At first I thought I'd misread everything. Maybe she'd decided to move on. Maybe Mark had come back already. But one night, after my shift, I found an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No name on the front, just my number written in her careful handwriting. Inside was a grocery list and a note. I'm sorry. It's too much right now. I sat there in the dark, rain dripping off the roof of the car, reading it again and again. Not a goodbye. Not an explanation either. Just a pause. The next morning, I went to the cafe anyway. Ordered coffee I didn't want. Stared at the door. The barista asked if I was waiting for someone. I said no. 2 days later, Mark called out of the blue. Hey, heard you've been helping at Ella's place, he said, voice light but probing. Yeah, a little. She's got a lot on her plate. Just be careful, okay? He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. My chest felt hollow after we hung up, like I'd been caught doing something I hadn't even done yet. At work, during a slow hour, I typed out a message to her. Need help with the boxes? Or tea? My thumb hovered over the send button. I deleted it. Typed again. I miss our talks. Deleted. In the end, my screen stayed blank. Days stretched. I imagined her with Mark again. Or with no one. Just sitting alone at that kitchen table, tracing circles on the rim of her cup. In my head, I heard her voice. You have no idea what this would cost. One night, I walked past her house. Lights off except for the back room. A shadow moved inside. Her, probably, lifting something heavy. I almost knocked. Almost. My fist hovered near the doorframe before I turned and walked back to the street. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Back at the cafe a week later, the barista slid a small package across the counter. Left for you, she said. Inside, my old black thermos, the one I'd lent her without thinking. No note. Just the thermos, warm still from tea poured who knows when. I held it, thumb rubbing the dent near the lid, wondering if it meant she was closing the door or opening it a crack for me to decide. It was late when I finally knocked. Her porch light was off, only the kitchen window glowing faintly. For a long moment, nothing moved inside. Then the door opened and she stood there barefoot, hair tied up messily, cardigan slipping from one shoulder. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," I answered. She stepped back, a small motion that still felt like permission. I walked into the familiar kitchen. It smelled of tea and cardboard, like before. Boxes still lined the walls, though fewer now. She closed the door softly and leaned against it, arms folded. "I got your thermos," I said, setting it on the table. "I figured you would." Silence. The clock ticked. I rubbed my palms on my jeans. She picked at the cuff of her sweater. "You've been avoiding me," I said at last. Her eyes flicked up. "I had to. People talk. Mark called me." She stopped, exhaled. "It's not fair to you. Or to me." I nodded slowly. I kept thinking maybe I'd done something wrong. "No," she said quickly. "You've done everything right." That's the problem. We stood on opposite sides of the small kitchen table, the thermos between us like a witness. Rain pattered faintly against the window. She pressed her fingers to her temples as if steadying herself. "I can't keep whatever this is," she said. "You're 20-something. You're supposed to be starting your life." She gestured at the boxes. "Cleaning mine out." I stepped closer, not too close. "Do you want me to leave?" Her mouth opened, closed. "I don't know what I want. I just know being near you." She shook her head. "It feels like breathing for the first time in a long time. And it scares me." I felt something in my chest ease and tighten at once. "It scares me too." She let out a small laugh, tired. "You're not supposed to admit that." "I'm not supposed to do a lot of things," I said. She stared at me. Her hands were flat on the table now, knuckles pale. I reached out, slowly, until my fingers brushed hers. She didn't move away. Our hands stayed there, barely touching, like a truce. "I don't know where this goes," I said. "I just know I keep thinking about you, even when I don't want to." Her eyes filled, but she blinked them clear. "Say it again," she whispered. "I think about you." She inhaled sharply, eyes closing for a heartbeat. When she opened them, she looked younger, almost, but also more tired. "I used to think no one saw me anymore," she said quietly. "You did. You do. That's why I kept pulling back." We stayed like that, breathing the same small space. The hum of the refrigerator, the rain, our own pulses. I wanted to cross the last inch between us, but didn't. Instead, I turned my hand palm up. She laid hers in it, tentative at first, then firmer. "No promises," she said. "I know. No plans." "Okay." We stood in the kitchen, holding hands like it was both an ending and a beginning. No kiss. No declarations. Just her thumb brushing the back of my hand, my thumb brushing hers back. She gave a small, shaky smile. "Okay." And for the first time in weeks, the room felt still, like we'd finally stopped circling the same point and just stood there together. By late autumn, the boxes in her house were gone. The kitchen was open now, a little echo where stacks had been. I still came by most mornings before work. Sometimes she was already at the cafe at 8:47 a.m., reading the paper, tea steaming in front of her. She'd look up, catch my eye, and there it was, a small, earned smile. No more glances darted like guilty secrets. Just recognition. We never had one big talk after that night in the kitchen. No confession, no dramatic decision. We simply didn't stop showing up. A week became a month. Our routines bent quietly around each other. She started keeping an extra mug by the kettle. I began carrying a thermos of her mild tea next to my black coffee. Mark moved back, but not into her life. He dropped off a box of things. They spoke in the doorway, and that was it. She told me about it one evening while we walked through the park. The same bench waited under the maple tree, wet leaves plastered to the seat. She brushed them aside with her sleeve before sitting. I sat next to her, like always. "It feels different now," she said, watching the children on the swings. "How?" I asked. "Less like waiting, more like living." I didn't answer. Instead, I poured tea from her thermos into the lid and handed it to her. She took it, fingers curling over mine just a moment longer than necessary. We drank in silence, like an old habit we'd both learned to value. Sometimes we still wobbled. She'd retreat into herself for a few days. I'd get restless, unsure what we were doing. But we'd find our way back. No promises, no plans, just two people trying not to disappear from each other's view. One winter morning I woke before dawn and walked to the cafe alone. She arrived a few minutes later, hair damp from the shower, cheeks pink from the cold. She set down her bag, took out a book, then looked at me and smiled. A soft, private smile that belonged only to that table, that hour, that steady rhythm we'd built. "You remembered my order again," I said when the drinks arrived. "You always drink it this dark," she teased. Her dry humor still caught me off guard. I folded a napkin while she traced circles on her cup. Nothing spectacular, just us. Later, at her house, she hung her coat and reached for my hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't speak about what we were or weren't. We made tea, opened the window to let in the cold air, and stood side by side watching it steam. It was ordinary, and it felt like hours. I thought back to the first time she'd sat across from me, the napkin folding, the way she'd said I was quieter now. We'd both been half-hidden then. Now, standing in her kitchen, her hand brushing mine as she reached for the kettle, I realized we'd stopped hiding. She glanced up. "Okay," she asked softly. I nodded. "Okay." Outside, the city moved on. Buses, sirens, kids on bikes. Inside, the clock ticked the same slow rhythm it always had, but it no longer felt like a countdown. Just time passing. Later, on the park bench at dusk, she leaned her shoulder against mine. Neither of us spoke. The swing chains creaked in the distance. In the thermos between us, tea stayed warm. Black coffee cooled at my feet. Small things, earned over time. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally stayed.